we have 6 golden pennies. That's what we set as our that floor rate. It's nothing that we have necessarily any play with. The tax levy will be the majority of the revenue that fills our buckets. So that's your local share, right? That's what it's commonly referred to as. A district's local share is the property taxes that are gained through our levy. The state will then provide the remaining as needed. In a few years ago, as we had found ourselves with property values being very high, we were in this issue of being in a recapture situation. Here, last SB 2 shifted that homeowner's exemption or homestead exemption to $100,000. That offset, we have moved further away from recapture, so we're no longer considered to be a recapture district. So we're not finding ourselves in that situation. So moving on, kind of talking a little bit more about that local versus state share. So keeping in mind that our property values are not controlled by the district, right? Our property values are set by our county appraisal districts. We're within Hayes, Caldwell, Guadalupe. So those CADs will actually go out and do an assessment. They will calculate the property values. They have shared an estimate, a preliminary estimate with us already that will be used to calculate those rates that I was speaking to. That balance is, as those property values start going up, your local share, that tax rate, the collections on that tax levy is going to cover the bulk of your revenue, with the state share decreasing. It's a counterbalance, right? It's the lower the amount of property tax that you get, the more the state will provide, and vice versa. Going into our buckets, if you will, those general fund buckets, looking at how the allotments that a district would receive. So a few of those buckets that you can see, those funding allotments on the left-hand graphic, you can see our basic allotment. Here in a second, when I provide you the breakdown, you'll see that basic allotment term or that fund figure is that 6160 that we've spoken about previously. In terms of advocacy, that's one thing that that has been scrutinized and really looked at, not having been changed in a matter of time. It's not keeping up with inflationary rates and things of that nature. It's still 6160, and that's one of those figures that has been presented at state legislature, proposed for change, right? Then we also have our foundation school program. Yes.
Mr. Doyle, what's 6160?
Oh, it's $6,160 per student.
Per student, thank you.
I'm sorry. Then you also have your foundation school program. That's where you have some tier allotments, your available school funding. That is a statute-based fund that every public school would receive some ASF funding from the state. You have your INS state aid. Remember that INS rates for debt service. Depending on certain situations, school districts may receive hold harmless. This goes back to that $40,000 versus $100,000 exemption. Your local tax levy and your Tier 1 allotments. The graphic on the right are expanding out of that Tier 1 allotments. So within that Tier 1 allotment bucket are these buckets. So these are program buckets, right? These all have a mandatory spend percentage. They all have a mandatory program. They all have strings attached, right? They're local funds that are calculated based on student WADA, that weighted average daily attendance, the number of students who are in the program. So if, for example, you see early education, the dyslexia allotment, GT, CTE, SPED, bilingual, SEE is state compensatory education, college and career military readiness, and then also the school safety allotment. You'll see in this next graphic, within those allotments, there are some challenges, if you will, that not only are here with San Marcos CISD, but really with, I would say, the greater majority of public schools. That regular program, and this is based off of a revenue projection going back to that first slide of that $84 million figure for next year. So using the data that we have, again, we're still collecting data as we move through. It's not going to be finalized really till summer PEIMS, but you can see that based on that 6160 figure, our regular program allotment would be $39.6 million. There's no necessary spend requirement because that's what's going to support your general education program, right? So that's why those are left blank, okay? Then you have your program buckets that we were just talking about. So for example, GT, the number of students that are within the GT program generate a revenue projection of $156,000. It's a required spend of 100%. We have to use 100% of that funding for GT supporting services, if you will. And that's what that required spend number is, right next to that. What we have budgeted, though, is $493,771. The reason for that, and you can see the difference in red on the furthest right-hand column. The difference is that we are supporting that program because we believe there's value in it. We provide teachers and resources for our GT program that exceed our actual earning of that 156. SPED education, again, this is one for advocacy. You can see, are not, I would say public ed is not funded to support the SPED services that truly we need. And that's just not a San Marcos thing, that's something throughout the state of Texas. You can see based on the student participation within their special education program, the projected allotment is $9.8 million. We have to use 55% of that for the SPED program, right? That's that $5.4 million figure. However, again, we have a district budget of $12.9 million for next year, of a difference of 7.5. Again, these are services that we're required to provide students who have been audited into services as such. We have teachers, we have support mechanisms, resources that we need to provide, that we have to provide, especially for some of the most sensitive students that we have in our district that we need to support. And we're not going to not fund them, but you can see that it comes as at a cost. And again, that just further drives that budget. You might ask what, yes ma'am.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So these sped dollars that we're talking about are state sped dollars. They're not the federal sped dollars, correct?
This is
right?
all state.
Okay, and so the 55%, does that mean that the state is allocating $9.8 million to us for our sped program, but we only have to spend 55% of it on special education?
Correct, yes ma'am. And that's all public ed. So where it has a 55% for, like, for example, SPED, state comp ed, bilingual, CTE, any public school district in the state of Texas will get their allotment. They have to spend at least 55% of that allotment directly on that program. And what I was going to say is that other 45% will go toward your general program, your regular program. You can use it for whatever indirect services to special education.
That's what it would cover. It's not that it's not the idea that we're supposed to use 55% of the costs that we're receiving to educate students with special needs on that population and then spend the other 45% on, say, the baseball team, right?
Well,
it's supposed to be, well, I mean, it's supposed to be providing, I'm just saying baseball team.
Yeah.
But I mean, but it's supposed to be providing ancillary services, right?
Correct.
Like other.
Well, that other 45% within all
General
of those,
mainstreaming and all the other things.
yeah, it can go to any other revenue source.
That makes more sense. The way
Yeah.
I was reading it just didn't
Right.
make sense. Thank you.
So, yeah, just kind of to reiterate that, when there's a 55% spend limit, that other 45 revenue that's earned can be used for anything, any other revenue need, expenditure need in the district. But you can see that it will hamstring a district when you're providing those services above that 55% and beyond. Dyslexia, again, you can see 305, it's 100% spend limit. We are budgeting 460 because, again, the importance of those services. State compensatory education, that again is a program for students who are considered at risk and educationally disadvantaged based on their circumstances. That's program language. Again, our allotment, we're projecting a little over $10 million. You can see that our required spend is 55%, but we're looking at spending roughly $200,000 over on state comp ed. Bilingual, again, at 55%. You can see our projected allotment, $897, where our budget is built. You can see that we're exceeding that by $175,000. CTE, again, 55% limit of 5.1 million. We're looking to come in right at that 55% in our budget. Early ed, 1.3. Again, we're looking at a budget, district budget of 1.5 with a difference of 273,000. School safety, this is the one that's, I would say, could be comical because the state of Texas is only going to provide funding for students at our campuses that are deemed campuses through II.A. You can see that $238,000 for school safety. Again, this doesn't speak to the grants that we have for school safety, but again, anytime you have a grant, there are several purse strings and several extremely stringent rules behind it, and you can't just use it for anything you want. So our school safety allotment projection is $238,000, but in our budget we have $1.6 million. So again, we want to definitely keep our students safe and make sure that our schools and campuses and our personnel are treated and feel safe within our resources. And then CCMR to $159,000, we're looking at a district budget of $338,000. Difference of $179,000. Again, the differences are all combined based on what we believe in San Marcos. That's why we have a district budget based on those figures that you see and not necessarily what we have on those spend allotments.
How does the school safety budget compare to previous years? Because I know we have a lot of new requirements, but I don't know if we were fulfilling some of those already.
So I can speak to the allotment, right? That allotment has grown. When that school safety allotment first came out, it was about $73,000. But again, we have been proactive in initiating different programs and different things to keep our campuses safe. Our budget really is that 1.6 is the first true year of, you'll see where our different personnel are included, but it does come at that cost of being higher than what we're getting for school safety. When you talk about your school safety grants, personnel costs don't necessarily come into play in those grants. There are several things that you have to do before you can pay personnel. So, and whenever you tie personnel to a grant, those FTEs, that staff is dependent on those grant funds, and we don't want to make a dependency on, especially for safety or any, for a lot of personnel. So talking about grants, these are supplemental federal grants. This is not that federal revenue resource that I spoke of. I wanted to be very transparent in all the funding streams that you have set forth for a school district. You can see supplemental is the key word, right? These are our federal grants, Title 1, 2, 3, 4. That's your ESSA grant. You can see the description of what those grants entail. They are all rule dependent, statute dependent. I could go all night and bore you to tears on those things, but you can see also how the dollar figures that align to those grants. And quite honestly, there is a misconception. I'm not going to say that $2.4 million is not a lot of money, but in all grand scheme of things, when you look at how much we have in our budget, it really is not that much money that we have for supplemental resources. Again, that's something that at the federal level that needs to change to provide more appropriations for districts to have. You can see Perkins 5 is a strengthening CTE grant, $143,000 to support our CTE programs throughout the district. And then IV.B, the formula grant, will support our special ed program, again, just shy of $2 million. So with that being said, if there's not any other questions, I'll turn it over to Ms. Munoz to talk personnel costs.
Good evening, board members. I'm Stephanie Munoz, Chief of Human Resources. So tonight, the sections I'll be covering with you are information as it relates to insurance and benefit projections. I know that's one of the items the board did request, and we do have more information to provide. We will look at historical data of past raises and compensation packages that we've approved. The board did request surrounding district budget information, so we will have a slide to give you an update on that. We do have our HR TASB services representative who will be giving you a salary and compensation presentation. We do have some scenarios based on that data to present to you, and then we'll leave it open for discussion. So the next slide I'll move into is our benefits information. I'm going to have someone on my team who oversees the benefits present.
Good evening. I'm Claudia Peterson, and I'm the Executive Director of HR. And as Ms. Munoz stated, we're going to go over just a couple of slides on our benefits. You'll see here on the screen, we have about 4 plans through our Active Care TRS. This is strictly our medical premiums. So we have it broken down by Active Care 2, what we refer to as an HD, which is the high deductible plan, the primary and primary plus. So as you go there to the right, we have broken down the different dollar amounts and the number of employees enrolled in each plan. And then we went ahead and put down exactly how much TRS their total premiums are per plan, what we contribute as a district, what the employee contributes, which is payroll deducted, and then we break that down for you on the monthly cost. That monthly cost is going to simply get the total TRS monthly premium times the number of employees enrolled in each of those plans, and then you'll have our total district contribution, or the amount that we pay for medical premiums alone. As you will see at the bottom, $395 is what we're currently contributing for each of these medical plans. For this year, TRS did release their rates on Friday, so the contribution amount now is $445. So there's been a little bit of a 12% increase on that monthly contribution. So what we're projecting is, if you see there, our primary plan, which is the highly sought plan of the majority of our employees, which is 614 employees that are currently enrolled in that plan. If we want to continue to allow that plan to be at a zero cost, which is where we're at this year at $395, then $445 is what we would need to contribute, so that that plan remains $0 for our employees. And currently, our total contribution for 23-24 is a little bit about $5.5 million, and then our projected amount is going to be $6.1 million for 24-25. So that difference there is broken down for you at $674,000. As far as the comparison among the districts within our region, which is Region 13, we pulled districts that participate in TRS, and these are all the districts that reported a $395 monthly contribution, which is this year's TRS rate. And as you'll see there, about 4 of them are ranked the same as San Marcos CISD, a 0 contribution for that primary plan. Again, that's the highly sought out plan where the majority of our employees enroll in that medical plan. All others, about 6 of them, you'll see there, they do roll over that cost to the employee, so you're looking at that monthly amount being deducted from the employee's monthly payroll check for the active care primary.
We'll transition to our historical data. So just to look back at 2018 to 2019, then all the way to last year's data of what the board approved, so that 3% plus longevity for teachers and nurses, 2% for administrative professionals, our clerical and paraprofessionals 3%, auxiliary 3%, and then in the past we did have incentive payments, so that was reflected there. Some of the information we were able to find on our surrounding districts is listed here. So we did see Eanes, their projected staff cuts, they don't know any at this time. They are projecting a 3% increase, and their deficit budget is $3.2 million. Hey CISD, they currently do not know their total amount of cuts, but they will be repurposing some of their class positions to offset cuts through attrition. They do not know their increase for the 24-25 school year, and they're looking at a $16 million deficit budget. Austin ISD, they're looking at attrition and cutting contracts. They do not have a known increase for next school year, and they're looking at a $30 million deficit budget. San Antonio ISD, unknown. Northside ISD, no pay increases, $84 million deficit budget. Comal ISD, still unknown. Pflugerville ISD, they're looking at a 2% raise at midpoint, $17 minimum for hourly, and $57,000 for starting teacher pay. They're looking at $17 million deficit. Round Rock ISD said the district would likely be looking at decreasing some positions, reimbursement, stipends, department allocation to reduce its budget for the upcoming school year, because 85% of the district's budget are allocated to staffing, and they are looking at a 1% raise, and their $30 million deficit. Del Valley, unknown. Bastrop, unknown at their projected raise, but their $8 million deficit. Lake Travis, 1% raise, $6.6 million deficit. So that is information that we're able to gain as of this time.
Can I ask,
Do you happen to know what percentage of our budget goes to staffing, just for comparison?
93% of our budget is in staffing. So typically what other districts see is 80 to 83% of their budget in staffing.
this is really terrific. This whole budget presentation might be the most helpful budget presentation I've ever seen, so thank you all. But I have a question here. The projected deficits with the pay increases, is that their projected deficit before the pay increase or the projected deficit with the pay increase? Do you know?
So the information right now that we were able to pull from the articles is going to be, some of them have put a raise, and so they do have a deficit budget.
Okay.
The
So it
ones
could be
that have
either,
not-
but it's ballpark. Got it. That's great. Thank you.
I am going to go ahead and transition now to our TASB HR Services compensation presentation. And this is Miss Amy Campbell from TASB HR Services.
Hi, thanks. Hi, I'm Amy Campbell, Director of HR Services at TASB. I'm a stand-in tonight for your usual consultant, who's our Assistant Director, Zach Hobbs. He wishes he could be here, but he's way out in the boonies. I wish I had known that you were pulling all of that data, because most of your peer districts are my clients, and so I did a lot of those presentations. I could have given you additional insider info. And one other tidbit that might be helpful, I had a meeting with TRS staff like 2 weeks ago, and we're going to co-present with them, my team and TRS health staff at SLI. So if you're going to be there Friday afternoon, we're going to be talking about some creative ways to implement active care in future years, because the cost is getting higher and higher each year. Okay, on to the regularly scheduled programming. So each year we work with y'all to look at compensation and make recommendations for change. We have the same process for about 200 districts each year across the state. We collect a lot of your data, and we're matching that to market data and peer information. We talk with district staff and district administrators at the beginning to find out what's working well, and we want to protect stuff that's working well, and then find out what's not working well so we can target some corrective measures. The good and bad news is every district is struggling with the same things, and so the lists are pretty consistent across the entire state, no matter the size and location of districts. But we know that everyone is kind of in the same boat, unfortunately, as far as funding limitations go. And so we're working hard to help districts be strategic in how they're compensating. We can't no one can give the pay increases that they want to give. So with limited funds, where can you direct that money to address concerns and issues that you have? And you'll see the market data in a minute and who we compared you to and what other sources we used. But we always come back with recommendations, and you've got 3 models to look at tonight. Many of your peers that you just heard about have had various multiple iterations of cost models along the way as they've gone through budget changes. Some are changing class sizes to try to save money and looking at different cost models too. I think Austin ISD is on model like 8 or 9 so far. So we absolutely are happy to come back and offer additional cost models as needed to fit your budget needs. But one thing we won't do is come back and say, well, you need to spend 12% to get to market or something like that, because it's just not feasible to do that. And so you tell us what cost models you want to see, and we'll bring back some recommendations that align with that. So this is the compensation 101 section of the presentation. A couple of things to keep in mind. We're working within pay structures that have control points. So there's a minimum and a maximum for each pay grade that we're looking at, and so each job will fit into a pay grade that has a minimum and a maximum, and those are surrounded, they surround the midpoint, which is going to align with market. So when we're talking about market value, we're also talking about your midpoints, because when we talk about pay, you've got your structures and then how your people fit within the structures, and we want both of those to be competitive, not only your individual staff pay, but the structures within which you're paying people, because the structures are what people see when they're applying for jobs. So the salary ranges that are offered and included in job postings. And so we try to help districts get people clustered around that market value, but of course all of that is within the limitations of funding availability. So when we talk about market, you may hear me say target, and here's a literal target here. And that market rate would be 100% or even with market median value. But know that individuals will be around that market rate based on their own demographics and characteristics, right? If I've got a lot of experience and I bring a bunch of credentials and skills and abilities, you would expect me to be above market, and that is appropriate. If I'm new to the position, if I'm just learning my job and I'm new to the district, you might expect me to be below market, and that is perfectly acceptable and a valid compensation strategy. But we want people to be spread around that market rate. We don't want everyone to be below or everyone to be above. We're going to be sprinkled around. And I forgot to say, stop me with questions along the way. You're absolutely welcome to interrupt. So this is very tiny text here, but you have a large list of market peers. You're in a very competitive area that's drawing from both San Antonio area districts and Austin area districts, and they are of different sizes. And so you'll see that for your hourly jobs and for your teachers and professional level jobs, we're looking at this entire peer districts list. But for your senior administrator positions, we're looking at similarly sized districts, because you've got some really big guys and some really little guys in your market group. We want to make sure there's apples to apples job matches. So for your high level administrative positions, we're looking at statewide districts from our salary survey responses of enrollment between 7,000 and just shy of 13,000 students. And then 2 non-school market sources we purchase data from, and we've included both Austin and San Antonio market values there. And those are both a mix of other public sector entities and private sector. So for jobs that exist outside of K-12, we factored in that market data so you get a full picture of the value of jobs, because you could go down the street and work at Buc-ee's just as easy as you could come to San Marcos. So. Okay, we also look at some teacher demographics, because I think this goes to, when we look at teachers, we're looking at the structure, so 0, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, what do you pay at each of those benchmark years? We also look at average pay, and average pay, because we pay based on years, looks like what your average teacher experience looks like. And so this pie chart here shows you the average experience of your current teachers, librarians, and nurses. You'll note that Just about, I look at my numbers here, 44% of your teachers currently have 5 or fewer years of experience, which is statewide a relatively high percentage of inexperienced staff, and 65% have 10 or fewer years of experience. In your standard run-of-the-mill school district, that's about 50%, and so your percentage of inexperienced teachers is higher. There's nothing wrong with that. We typically see higher percentages in growing districts, in urban and suburban districts. The thing to be aware of is that when you have less experienced staff, it takes more resources and time to grow and develop those teachers. Some districts have a strategy of hiring inexperienced teachers because then you can grow them into the instructional practices you want modeled in your district. It just means that dedicating extra time and resources to helping them grow and develop is important. And for your new hires, you've got a very significant number of folks who have come to you this year with no educational experience whatsoever. 70% of your new hires have no prior experience. This has become very common to see this year. It just is harder to find fully certified and trained teachers to fill positions. So again, the reminder that this group of inexperienced teacher new hires will require some additional time and effort to support them as they develop. So on to the market data, and I talk really fast, so by all means, ask questions along the way if I lose you. Yeah.
You have a question, Ms. Campbell. The teacher demographics for newly hired teachers, you said, so your graph is 70% in San Marcos have 0 experience. How is that relative to rest of the state, or at least our local?
Pretty common. We've seen, the significant majority of new hires in the state this year have no prior experience. There is, if you're interested in having trouble sleeping, there is a dashboard on II.A. that will show you data for newly certified and newly hired teachers across the state. So you can click on your district specifically, or all of the region, or all of the state, and you can see the numbers. It's very different than it used to be a few years ago. So now the significant increase in newly hired teachers are folks with no certification whatsoever. So through District of Innovation exemptions, a lot of districts are hiring completely uncertified teachers. So not only are they statewide, not only are they inexperienced, but they're uncertified as well. There are a lot more teachers coming through alternative certification programs and through internship certificates. So the landscape of new teachers looks different than it did a few years ago.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, market data. So your market median is the bluish line at the top. The orange line is your teacher pay rates at 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. And the green line is your pay rates with longevity stipends added. And so you'll note that there's probably more white space than you'd like to see between the teacher salary in your district compared to the market median. That picture looks a little bit better when you factor in the longevity stipend, but really that's addressing your more experienced teachers' competitiveness to market. So still in the early years, you fall further below that market rate. Across all of those benchmark years, when you look at your other 15 peers, you're ranking between 12th and 14th out of the 16 total, including you. So very much near the bottom as far as teacher pay goes. So this slide shows the actual numerical values there. I'm going to draw your attention to the bottom 2 rows. In fact, the bottom row is probably the most important one there. That's the dollar difference between you and market median at each of those years of experience. And just as a math refresher, the median is the middle value of all of the market data for each of those years. And so you're roughly $2,000 below the middle of the group. So pretty significantly below, I think, where any of us would want to be. The other thing I like to think about to help the math make more sense is when all your neighbors give a pay increase. Let's say for simplicity, mathematical simplicity, they're going to give $1,000. If you give $1,000, you will still be this distance from market. So to bridge that gap, you have to not only give this dollar difference, but the same amount that they're giving. So it just, it makes it much more difficult and harder, more expensive to catch up to that median. I realize I'm bringing lots of gloomy news, but again, roughly $2,000 below market at each of those points. And then when you look at the ranking, this is, again, lots of tiny numbers there, but the orange line represents your district starting pay amongst your peers. So relatively near the bottom. But yeah, so that shows you how you fit in there.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So, you had the market salaries of the 15 school districts. Do you
Yes.
have the percent that they use, that they spend? Like, we're at 93% of our district is people. So for these districts, do you have what percent that they're at? Are they at 80? Are they, are they more in line with, or are we out of line? Are we the anomaly that we're at 93%?
So Central Texas is somewhat unique statewide in that we tend to staff more richly than other areas of the state do. We offer our teachers some perks that other areas of the state don't. So extra conference periods and smaller class sizes and things like that. So there's a trade-off there. I think, I don't have concrete numbers for all of these districts. I was trying to count up how many I've presented to this year. I think it's 4 or 5 on this list, and they are below 93%. So I think you're definitely on the top end of that percentage. I think 80 to 85% is more commonly what I see. One thing I've also looked at is when you look at your current salary budget, we always expect teachers to be the bulk of that budget because they're half your staff and they're salaried professionals, so they cost a little bit more than your auxiliary staff do, for example. But that percentage of your salary budget keeps creeping up each year. Not just you, but the royal you. As we increase pay for teachers, they represent a higher and higher percentage of our salary budget. I'm not sure if that directly answered your question, Dr. Okay. So when we look at teaching area stipends, you are relatively competitive with these for your master's degree and bilingual, but I will note that there are certain areas that other districts are really working hard to be extra competitive in. For example, Austin this year went to $7,500 for their high needs special ed stipend because they were just really having difficulty filling those positions. And that is an area where you can't exempt yourself from certification requirements, so you have to find certified teachers. And so I think some of their neighbors may try to get a little closer to that high number just to compete with them. But 11 of the 14 peers who reported a high needs special ed stipend pay more than San Marcos ISD does. For bilingual, 10 of your 14 neighbors who pay a bilingual stipend pay more than y'all do. So while 6,000 isn't that far away from 6,500, most of your peers are at 6,500 to 7,500 for that too. I would say, it's more important to stay in the ballpark of what your neighbors are doing. Folks aren't going to leave you for $1,000, but if that distance gets too far apart, then that definitely could impact. So one thing we've included for your benefit here is when you see some of the market comparisons, you may say, wow, those are lower than we expected. I wanted to just share, or Zach wanted to share, that your assistant principal and principal experience kind of tracks with your teacher experience, and that you have some lesser trained campus administrators, again, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that certainly may impact salary comparisons because you've hired folks who are more green than some of the campus administrators in your neighboring districts. So 75% of your principals have fewer than 6 years of experience as a campus administrator, and 95% of your assistant principals have fewer than 6 years as a campus administrator. So again, more resources needed from central office to support and develop your campus administrators. And part of what they're supporting and developing is their ability to support the educators on their campus too. So it just means a heavy lift, I think, for everyone district-wide. Okay, market salaries. So you've got a few columns here. The first column is the job grouping. So what kind of positions are we talking about? The next column is employee pay to market. So how your average pay compares to market median average pay. The next column is your midpoint to market. So how your structures compare. And the last column is how many jobs were looked at in this group. One little note is that for central administration, many of your positions have slightly more duty days than your neighboring districts do. So this is a daily rate comparison rather than annual salary. If you were to look at annual salary, you look lower to market than you do here. So on terms of a daily rate comparison to market, within 2% for central administration, within 3% for campus administration, which is a good thing considering you do have those growing and developing campus administrators. Within 3% for your professional non-teaching staff, and then within 4% for campus non-teaching staff. Again, your structures are very competitive, so those you can sit tight on them, relatively speaking, for a little bit before you need to move those to keep up with market movement. It's a matter of getting people further into those structures. When we look at your non-exempt positions, these are your hourly staff. This is where, I know Stephanie mentioned Pflugerville, for example, moved to $17 an hour to start. Austin's at $20 an hour. There's a push in Central Texas to get those pay structures more competitive. You're doing great right now as far as aligning with your peers for the hiring rates. And average pay looks good to market for your hourly staff as well, which is good. That's an area where you are definitely competitive. So recommendation 1 is about proposed structure adjustments. As I mentioned, your structures look pretty good to market, and so you don't need to do a lot there. It's minor adjustments and adjustments to specific jobs like bus driver, where your neighbors are ramping up their pay, and so it's just a matter of making some structure adjustments to get those closer. Recommendation 2 is 3 cost models. This is the general pay increase. It's a 1%, 2%, or 3% across the board increase. And then number 3 is the specific adjustments to different job groups. We want to make sure everyone makes at least 1% above their pay grade minimum. We don't want to leave anyone outside of the structure. We want to make sure that folks in the educator career pathway are making slightly more than they would make as a teacher. We don't want to disincent folks moving up that pathway and gaining responsibility as we increase the teacher pay structure. That's a kind of frequent problem that we're trying to prevent. Strategic adjustments are for jobs that are, for people rather, that are below midpoint, more than 10% below midpoint. It's small adjustments to get those closer, as well as specific jobs that are difficult. That's kind of the target list of jobs we talked about at the beginning. A group of jobs like related services. So all of the, I call them the alphabet soup group, but LSSPs, OTs, PTs, SLPs, DIAGs. That group is really difficult to fill and keep. Statewide, nationwide, really. And so small adjustments to that group as well. And then placement scale adjustments, so that was mostly for your bus drivers, just to make sure that their pay aligns with experience and we can spread them out to market competitive rates. And then one added recommendation, given the lesser experience of your teachers, part of the heavy lift gets added to your mentor teachers to help support and develop your new teachers. And so increasing that stipend, I think, carries a relatively small cost in the grand scheme of things, but definitely will help reward your mentor teachers for all the work they're doing to support your new staff. Okay, 3 cost models. I'll go through the first one slowly, but zoom right through the rest. The first group is the name of your pay structures, and hopefully it's illustrative as far as who's in those groups. The next group is your general pay increase. That's your across the board adjustments, across the board increases. The next group are adjustments. I realize this part is less exciting for them too. The next part is adjustments. That's the targeted and strategic increases we talked about. And then the last column just sums the first 2. So the bottom line for the 1% is 1.2. Go ahead, you were going to ask something.
Where do those SLSs,
The alphabet soup.
Yes, where do they
They
fall
are in
in
the
these papers?
administrative professional group.
Thank you.
That's why that percent, or that dollar amount is higher there too.
Thank you.
And then the Model 2, you'll notice that as the pay increase goes up, the adjustments go down a little bit, as if you give more upfront, then you can, you don't have to give as much at the tail end. And then the bottom line for the 3% model is 3.3%. So each time between 0.2 and 0.3% at the end. Phew, okay, questions? Can I help answer anything for you?
I'm going to shift back to the presentation then. So in front of you, you will see the three models. We have included the longevity, so it is listed. We would have Model 1 starting teacher pay at $53,700. Right now, we're at $52,500. Then Model 2 would be at $54,300 plus the longevity. Model 3 starting teacher pay at $55,000 plus the longevity. So each of those are listed, same as the slides that Ms. Campbell presented, but we historically like to just have one little table to look at, and then what the finance team has put together is the total salary cost at the very bottom, so that you can see which each model package and how that affects our total salary cost.
Is that total salary cost before or after health insurance?
That's calculated with
With
that,
it.
with the updated. health
With the
insurance.
updated, continuing what we've been doing to date of paying for the zero under the one category for
Correct.
anybody who wants it, and so, which was estimated to be, so like, I can assume that this 79, 79, and 80 all include the $6.1 million. Okay.
And do they include the stipends that go along with all of the salaries? Okay.
So, the next four slides take that information that you just heard and expand on how does it overall impact our budget. Assuming that we're working off of 84 million, a revenue projection 84 million, I'll walk you through this graphic. So that would mean our total staff budget, if we were to just roll over next year, these are not, this factor or this figure is not those staffing increases that Ms. Munoz and our rep have talked about. So it would be 78.2 million. Our M&O budget, we are predicting at 17.9. We still have a little central office that we plan to pay out. That figure could decrease over the month of May and June as we get that contractor work paid. But right now we see it at 3.8 million. So those calculate out to an estimated expenditure of $100 million. That would leave an estimated budget deficit of 16 million. Our estimated 3-month operating figure would be 24 million. Our estimated fund balance as we close in June of 24 would be 47.2 million. When you calculate that budget deficit, you can see that the June of 25 fund balance would be 31.1 million, and that would leave us an unassigned fund balance of a little over 7 million. So moving into model plan 1, that is taking
Sorry,
it.
sorry. Okay, so I think that this all makes sense, although I think we need to point out that the 3.8 for our central office is something we've already committed to, right? We can't
Correct.
stop the process at this point. That train has left the station, but it's also not going to be recurring costs.
Correct. By December, it should be paid out. That's the timeline of completed construction, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So the unassigned fund balance reflects the fact that we will pay that money out for central office and be done with that, and then that will be what's remaining unencumbered, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And it also, the 24 million 3-month operating is accounted for, so the 7 million is in excess of that 24 million.
Correct.
Operating expense that we keep.
Not that we only have 7 million, yes.
Correct.
I have a question also.
Yes, sir.
So, I'm still a relative noob at this whole budgeting thing, but how much of that 78 million salary, so we should be able to calculate last year what we estimated was going to be our salary budget and how close to actual we came with that, and do that from the previous 3 years, so we can actually get a true idea of what our deficit is going to look like versus seeing this big number deficit, and then we go to the end of the year and go, well, we didn't spend, we didn't hire 15 employees or whatever. I mean, we should have some kind of, at this point in time in the existence of the high school or the school district, we should have some clue about how many positions are going to go unfilled, so that we can really get a better idea of what the total staff budget is, not the best case scenario. Because I have a problem approving a $16 million budget deficit, but then I'm assured that we've never ran a budget deficit. So to me, that is, we have a budget process problem, we have an estimating problem first before we have a money problem. If I look at this and it says $6 million, we have a money problem, but really we're not doing that. So can we get some estimates of what it looks like as far as how much are we saving each year on salary where we're not spending, so we can kind of estimate really what our true deficit is?
Yeah, we can provide those estimates for you. But I also want to reiterate that 78.2 million is calculating everybody who's staffed currently and we plan to move into next year. So with that 78.2 million staff is who's.
That's not unfilled positions. Those are currently staffed positions.
Correct.
So what you're estimating is then that this 16 million is a better projection of the deficit, because I forget what we estimated originally last year, but I think it was a lot more than 16.
26.
Yeah. So this is a better projection of that.
Correct.
And I know y'all been working on the projection, so I wasn't trying to dig at you. I'm just trying to grasp this so I have a better understanding when I raise my hand to vote that I'm actually voting for.
Yeah, that's fine.
Are there any recommendations about how the percentage or a dollar amount or anything that we should have in unassigned funds? Because to me, the emergency fund is an emergency fund that
There's no typical
Okay.
Guidance, if you will, on unassigned fund balance. The guidance out there is to have a 3-month operating budget for the rainy day emergency use.
And if we don't have that, when we go out to do future bonds, that affects
It would
credit
affect our
balance.
our first rating with the state, and it also would potentially affect our bond rating with National Bond Company.
So that's necessary.
Correct.
But the unassigned fund balance is kind of,
It's your
whatever
extra
we just
savings. It's on
determine we
top
want.
of
Yeah.
top
Okay.
of that 3 months, correct. So looking at model plan 1, so that staff, the total staff budget is taking the projection that has been provided to us by Ms. Munoz, our TASB representative. That is calculated on top of, as we roll the zero plan forward plus what is in that Model 1 plan, it comes out to 79.1 million. Again, the budget, M&O budget, it doesn't change, 17.9. Central office doesn't change. You can see your estimated expenditure does increase to 100.9 million. Your budget deficit does go up to 16.9. The operating cost does go up because you have higher expenditures to 24.2. Those fund balances have differences, and you can see our unassigned fund balance would be projecting at 6 million. Model Plan 2, again, taking the zero plan, adding in that extra cost as the Model 2 calls for. You would see that now your total staff budget is $79.7 million. M&O and central office are accounted for. Your total estimated expenditure total would be $101.6 million with the deficit of 17.6. Again, your operating cost does increase slightly because your expenditure total has increased. You can see the differences in your estimated fund balance and your unassigned fund balance at 5.2. Model 3, again, taking that zero plan figure, adding in those figures, you can see that your total staff budget goes up to $80.5 million. M&O central office calculated in, your estimated expenditure total would be $102 million, leaving you an estimated budget deficit of 18.3. Again, these are estimates based on the data that we have right now. Your 3-month operating at 24.6, providing you an estimated unassigned fund balance based on these figures, and again, a revenue projection of $84 million, of $4.3 million. So I want to reiterate the timeline. We are getting very close to June. It'll be here before you know it. So we do ask for suggestions, guidance, recommendations from our board. So that way, by June 17th, we are able to provide a budget. So that way you can adopt that budget. If there are any necessary additional data or pieces of information, please let us know. We can provide that either at the May 20th regularly scheduled board meeting, or if we need a June 3rd budget workshop. But keep in mind, as we make those changes, it does cause a domino effect to be able to get all those changes calculated in. We also need to have our published documents with the paper to adhere to statute and legal requirements, and so we need to have that sooner rather than later.
I have a question. So at the last meeting, we approved 3 items that we were going to freeze spending on. Where does that factor in here?
So it factors into that $78.2 million as we've been working through staffing, working through attritioning out people, as those people have moved away from the district or have left the district. Their calculations are figured in that $78 million. We're also looking at not replacing certain non-instructional personnel that are within the district as well. Again, those FTEs are not counted in that $78.2 million.
So does that mean that next year, regardless, if we take Model 1, 2, or 3, that there are certain positions that will require budget changes if we decide to go ahead and fill them?
Correct.
We would
Okay.
have.
And some of them that won't because they're calculated in here already? So
Correct.
I'm guessing primarily the instructional positions that are most essential are in here, and some of the other non-instructional positions
Correct.
are not. Is
They've
that
been pulled
fair?
out
Okay.
of that zero plan.
And the reduction in travel comes out of the M&O budget?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Ms. Kane first, and then Ms. Villalpando?
Could we possibly get a 1.5% projection? Is there,
We can tally that up.
okay.
That's fine. Ms. Villalpando?
And my question is on the longevity GPI. That's what making the difference on the increase in from the, what is it, 78 to 80, whatever. I think that's what it, anyway. Can you explain that to me? It's gonna be up to the board to approve which one of these we want to use for longevity?
One of the, are you referring to this slide, the model 1, 2, and 3
Yes,
that have the longevity calculated?
Exactly.
Yes, we're asking for those recommendations from the board to let us know how we need to proceed in our finalizing our budget.
So
That-
in
that
each
would-
one, in each one of those columns, the longevity is the same. It's the 1%, 2%, and 3% overall pay raise.
Now you really
So we
confuse
would
me.
keep-
One is 1%, that's not the same as the other.
Yeah, it's 1% plus the longevity pay that we already talked about.
Right, so on our teacher step schedule, you'll see 0 all the way down, and then you'll have the amount per step, and then you'll have the longevity, kind of like a stipend. So if you didn't go with 1, 2, or 3, they're still gonna get longevity pay. But the 1, 2, and 3 has 1% plus longevity, 2% plus longevity.
Can you remind us when longevity pay kicks in?
5 years of service,
5 years within the district?
yes.
So I would like to see, I think that this teacher's market salaries is really helpful. I would argue that some of these schools are more in our competition circles than others are, right? And there are
Oh,
some
yes.
that we just, they have just a universe of different resources available to them than we do. But I would like to see the market salaries for their hourly and auxiliary staff also, because my gut feeling is that some of them that like Judson, Del Valley, like they're drawing on different labor pools, right? They have the whole more metro areas, and so I'd like to see where their hourly lines up with ours. I know you said that Austin ISD is looking to try to get to $20. Okay, which is admirable. But so I'd like to see that. I think, you know, my 2 cents in the moment looking at this stuff, I think you've done a great job. I think this is an impossible situation that we are all faced with, given the folks in Austin's refusal to find some way to better fund our education system. So I applaud y'all in your creativity. I think these are difficult choices, and you've found some options for us. And I think honestly, like both option 2 and option 3 in this climate would make us pretty competitive with our neighbors in ways that, you know, we about as well as we can expect to be in this environment. So thank you. Other questions, comments, requests for information?
We did want to ask a follow-up question in our cabinet meeting today. Some of the questions we wanted to present to the board is, as we staff for next year, positions for instruction, right? We're saying no to hiring anything other than instructional positions. So we wanted some clarity on positions like bus drivers, custodians, child nutrition. And so just to seek feedback from you all and the board as we prepare for next year, what do you all believe to be instructional staff?
I mean, I think certainly, in my head, instructional staff are teachers, nurses, librarians, that first category that we've outlined. I don't know if other people might have different ideas on that, but I think direct in the classroom student instruction provider, I guess, is maybe the clearest way. I think there's lots of people teach, right, and lots of people contribute to the teaching, but that's sort of the line for me. But I think what's going to be important for us next year is that we are really closely tracking all of these expenses, right? And so I think to Mr. Shank's point that we need to really keep a hold on how many openings we have that are not filled. Like, what do our actuals look like as we're moving through month to month, so we can see like if we are ahead or behind on our estimates. Because, you know, personally, I feel like if we're ahead on our estimates, then maybe we will have more latitude for more hiring, right? Versus if we are falling behind, maybe we need to close ranks a little bit. So I feel like that process is going to be important, that we are, I know it's hard. I know that, you know, a lot of it is like many different moving pieces and you don't exactly know what amount is coming in, when it's going to come in until it comes across. I get that, right? It's not an exact science, but I think as close as we can come, I think you've set a great foundation, and as close as we can come to tracking that as accurately as possible, so we can all have an understanding so that we're making the decisions as a body.
So then for positions that maybe the cabinet and the superintendent feel need to be presented to you all, we can bring those forward. Say we lose quite a few custodians and we're not able to operate the campus, those things would be brought forward so that you all can evaluate before we restaff those areas.
I mean, I don't think that's ideal, but I think that's sort of the situation that we're in, right? If we're going to be looking at a $15-16 million budget deficit, then I think that we need to understand where the dollars are going. And that, I mean, everybody is welcome to disagree with me, but that's sort of my take on it.
I think that's the intent of what we decided in the last meeting as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you look at it and you sit there and you go, okay, we have $7K in unassigned, or $7 million unassigned. If let's just say we cut the budget deficit in half, and this is right now without a pay raise. Let's say we're within 50% of that deficit. We're still cutting into our 3-month operating rainy day fund. And is there any state punishment for going into that, or is that just
We're
a
not, though.
requirement that they don't really monitor?
But the fund balance that's listed is in addition to the 24,000.
Right.
The 24,000 is always maintained. In addition to that, we would have also 7,000.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, the seven, so if we, eight, let's say we do half of that, that covers our unassigned fund balance, and that $1 million has gotta come from somewhere. I don't think we're gonna lay off anybody for half of the year to make that, so that's, I mean, those bills are gonna have to be paid, so that comes out of the rainy day fund. And what happens if we do go into the rainy day fund?
This is the projection based on a 16 million deficit, and then at the end of the year, we would still have 7 million extra over and above our rainy day fund.
Already accounting,
getting messed
already
up.
accounting
Yes.
for your
Yes.
3
Next
months.
year.
Still not great, but,
Right.
yeah.
Which next year, but then the
Which would be
next
next
year,
year.
we would
But then
have
if we
these
keep
rollover
doing that,
costs
yes.
that we
So-
would have to, if the
That
state.
makes no sense. If we're estimating a $16 million deficit, there won't be an unassigned balance. How can you have a deficit and an unassigned balance?
So keep in mind that our fund balance right now, we're predicting, and we look at June because that's your audited fund balance, right? We're looking at June of 2024, our fund balance would be 47.2 million. So when you add in the deficit of that 16 million,
Okay.
it would
Gotcha.
leave you with that 31. Now, to your point, Mr. Shanks, you got to keep in mind, these are estimates. We don't know the unpredictable things that would happen throughout the year. We also don't know who would come in, come out, what kind of influences, for example, COVID, right, would have on these things, on these figures. So also to that point, your unassigned fund balance is above what you have to have for that 3-month operating.
Yeah, no, I understood that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I got a little twisted in there.
Yeah.
That was my bad. My apologies.
It's complicated.
So
I had my budget I have to do every year. Is it like this?
It's well done.
so
I
I,
guess maybe, I'm going back to who do I consider to be an educator or a teacher, right? Like, those categories are difficult. But I think one thing we need to also be hard-nosed about is remembering that we have state assessments that are coming down on us and that have significant effects on our community, on our schools, on our rankings, on, I mean, there's a ripple, right? And so one other thing is looking at, people whose jobs require the administration of STAR tests, I think, is one of the categories that we have to make sure that we are meeting, attracting the best talent that we can and keeping them and growing them, and doing what we need to be doing to be competitive in that segment, so.
I think it would be helpful to have a number associated with the longevity pay being given to people who have been teachers in Texas outside of San Marcos. And I think that it'd be valuable to have that number as a point of comparison. So if you include not just teachers who have taught in San Marcos for that period of time, but teachers who have taught in other districts in Texas for 20 years. Particularly given the number of teachers with little or no experience that we have, and that number is higher by about 15% than other districts in the state. So including longevity.
Potentially, that would increase our step schedule. So if we went that direction, then it wouldn't just be teachers in San Marcos CISD who have 5 years and then go to their step schedule. You're looking at all teachers above 5 years getting that stipend because they're more qualified, have more years of experience.
Yeah, I'm just interested in the number. What's the difference? What would our cost difference be if we included any district as longevity?
I do want to circle back on this timeline, just knowing that we are pressed for time. If we need to, if the board would like, if there's any additional information that we need to bring forward to the regular scheduled board meeting on May 20th, please let us know, because we are seeking guidance and we want to wrap this up so that way we can provide you scenarios. We did last year in June, we had 3, maybe 4, it's been a long time. I've slept since then a little bit. we had scenarios, and the board adopted a scenario, if you will. So if that's something that you would like for the June meeting, we can possibly bring. Right, they did. Right.
So what we would have, it's agenda, it's an agenda item for May. You'll see all of the plans that we just walked through. In addition, we'll include the 1.5 as requested. And then we'll seek guidance and for you all to take vote of what plan you'd like us to move forward with, so that our finance team can then go into the system and generate the plan so that you'll take action in June for the budget. So we will present on 4 plans at the May 20th meeting, and then at that point, June will be presenting the final plan.
Great, thanks, Shel. Really, this has been incredibly helpful and clarifying, and I know it's a lot of work, and I appreciate it. I think we all do.
Can I,
No.
I know I'm asking something weird to begin with, but in that 1.5% plan, can we make the starting pay 54,000? So it kind of fits into that. Because Model 1 is 53.7 and Model 2 is 54.3. To kind of follow the same pattern that the other ones are using.
So 54,000 as a starting point?
Yeah, because that falls in the middle of the 1% and the 2% plan starting pays as well then.
We can, but with that, it is going to have to bring up our step schedule, so we can work on that. Because when we raise the starting teacher pay, we also have to look at those that are already making that amount of money and adjust them up, so it doesn't
Yeah.
impact the step schedule. We can certainly look at that.
I'm presuming that's what already happened in these other ones though too, right? Okay.
I think what you're saying
Just
though
making
is
sure.
that we can either have a starting salary of 54, or we can have a 1.5% from the median, right? Because you're saying that if you adjust it to the starting salary being 54,000, then it might mean that the median does not work out evenly to 1.5 across. Is that right? Right.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Okay. Then go back to just 1.5, please.
I think Sandra had something.
Ms. Lopez, did you have something? Can't hear anything being
I
said.
was just everything that was said just a minute ago, that wasn't at a microphone, I wasn't able to hear it, so I was just kind of trying to catch up there.
Sorry, we apologize for that.
That's okay.
So I think what was set off the dais was that if we increase to 1.5% model and go to 54,000 starting pay, they will have to adjust the step schedule because of compression.
So I rescinded my request.
Gotcha, okay. Yeah, I heard you rescind that, I just couldn't understand what was going on beyond that. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Great. Then let's move back.
Where were we?
And I think that we should go into executive session and take care of those items, and then we'll move to the last item with the board self-evaluation following our discussions, and adjourn after that. So it is now 7:44. Thank you, Ms. Campbell. And the board is moving into executive session for the reasons stated earlier. Thank you. came out of that final report that we got. One of them is to schedule the Team of 8 training, which we're in the process of doing that. We need to create a yearly calendar that shows when we're going to be reviewing various data points and looking at having various different discussions. I know Ms. Gunther is already in the process of drafting that, so she'll have that within the next few weeks for us to review and amend, and that way everybody, it'll be more predictable, sort of what is the way we're looking to staff from, and
It's tied to y'all's board meeting calendar.
Right.
Yeah.
so that'll be great. And I think at this point,
They also had the recommendation that we review local policy, which we've undertaken.
right, yes.
And not only review, but write policy to help dictate procedure and smoothness of running the meetings.
Yes, so that would be, I think, start with our board operating procedures, which is what I thought would be the starting point for our Team of 8 when we get to that. We can get it scheduled unless you'd rather make that an agenda item.
To review this operating procedures at the Team of 8. This seems like a good idea to me, but I won't
Is
be.
that sufficient to what you're thinking, Mr. Shanks?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, no, beat trying to do it in
Yeah,
board meetings.
okay. So will be the subject of our Team of 8, local policy review. We have undertaken that and plan to do it, the calendarization. Anything else? No, not at this point. Okay, well, I think that's a lot to take on for now, and we will try to incrementally build on that as we go. Thank you all very much for sticking with and hanging out. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mary,
I move that we adjourn.
So made,
I second it.
seconded, all in favor, please raise your hand.
Sandra
Thanks,
came on
y'all.
for the-
Time.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra, for coming on for that.
Time.
Time is